first visit in the store?
No, no. I was actually here, or rather the previous incarnation, when I was 12 years old, and I still have one of the books I bought here, quite a prominent place on my bookshelf, namely the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction by John and David Nichols.
But this time you're here to cite a book. Quantum Thief, how would you describe it in a sort of short way? It's an adventure story.
Yes, so the elevator pitch for Quantum Thief could be Arsène Lupin, sort of gentleman thief heist story, sort of like Ocean's 11 in a far future where people can sort of change bodies, upload their minds into software where break-ins and crimes don't involve so much stealing jewels or gold, but rather memories and quantum states and more esoteric objects like that.
There's a lot of quantum physics involved in your book, and there is a reason for that. You've got a PhD in quantum physics.
I got a PhD in string theory, which is sort of a branch of mathematical physics that tries to unify quantum mechanics with general relativity. So it's sort of there's a lot of arguments at the moment if that's actually going to be the theory of everything, or if it's just this sort of totally wrong direction that has been taken. But it's a very interesting area of research, and it's kind of a good source for techno babble for a science fiction writer. Although I would say it doesn't. I mean, the physics side doesn't really feature that prominently in Quantum Thief. I mean, I know it's sort of been described by some reviewers as being a physics-heavy book, but in my opinion, it actually isn't. I mean, all the sort of heavy technological stuff is more in the background, and I would say the stronger speculative aspects are maybe about things like privacy and sort of the future of what happens when the boundary between our own memories and what the information we store digitally actually gets blurred, and what does that imply for social relationships, friendships, sort of intimate relationships, and so on.
When I read the book, and do you pronounce it Gebulots? It reminded me actually of the privacy settings on Facebook. Is that an inspiration?
It is meant to be like that. So basically, there's a society in the book called Oubliette, where privacy is sort of the highest value in some sense, higher than sort of preventing crime or theft or even murder. And this actually came about sort of from thinking about. I mean, I very much wanted to write a story that had detective story elements set in the far future. This immediately introduced sort of a paradox, because it's like some discussions we had in the Eurocon last night. In the future, we are probably going to have sensors everywhere. I mean, we already have cameras on our mobile phones. Probably pretty easily, we could have devices in a couple of years that we carry around that actually record everything that's happening around us. So certainly, if we go a couple of hundred years into the future, everything is going to be stored somewhere. So that probably makes committing crimes quite difficult, and police work a little bit boring, because you could potentially access this sort of digital memory and just see what happened. So the way around that was actually to create a society where privacy and control over over all information about yourself is the most important thing, the most fundamental value in society. So that's where the Gebulots comes from. So the Oubliette, every conversation, every interaction involves some sort of definition of Gebulots, or a boundary of what are we allowed to remember or store or share about this event, about this conversation, sort of for our later use or for sharing with others.
The main character of the book, or there are actually several main characters, but I'm thinking of the Flambeur. Could you tell us a bit about him? He's a thief.
So Jean Le Flambeur is sort of like a future incarnation, a future version of Arsène Lupin. Although he's not just that. He's sort of a legendary post-human thief who's gone through many different personalities and incarnations, who sort of starts the book as a prisoner, ends up being broken out of sort of a futuristic game theoretic jail to carry out one more job, and sort of during the course of the book he slowly has to piece together his identity and memories from sort of various things he can find in the Oubliette. And he's sort of a trickster character. He's sort of if you go back to the roots of the gentleman thief archetype, to Arsène Lupin, created by Maurice Leblanc. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was sort of a contemporary of Sherlock Holmes. But in many ways, kind of a more, to me, a more interesting character than Sherlock Holmes. Arsène Lupin commits crimes because it's fun. He doesn't really do it for sort of any sort of financial gain or because it's evil. He does it because it's a challenge. That's kind of mirrors Sherlock Holmes' behavior in the sense that Sherlock Holmes doesn't necessarily solve crimes because of sort of a drive for justice, but because he needs an intellectual challenge. But what's interesting about Lupin is that he sort of goes through these cycles of attempted redemption. He tries to stop being a thief. He tries to stop sort of manipulating everybody around him and involving them in his schemes. He does things like getting married and starting a family, like joining the French Foreign Legion to fight for France, or becoming a gardener, or sort of various other things. But he's sort of inevitably drawn back into this identity that he's created for himself, because actually Arsène Lupin is not his real identity. Arsène Lupin is not his real name. Arsène Lupin is a name, his identity he's created for himself. But somehow he's trapped by it, and he actually, in spite of these many cyclical attempts, he cannot escape. So one of the sort of, that was kind of the, for me, the defining characteristic of Arsène Lupin that Jean Lupin shares. Except, of course, that Jean exists in a future when it is possible to sort of download your mind into a different body, actually manipulate your memories, assume a different personality, change yourself in sort of much more fundamental ways than just sort of the kind of man of thousand faces type disguises that Arsène Lupin uses. So one of the core questions in the book and in the trilogy, the two sequels, is going to be: is the story going to be different in this kind of world where is some sort of fundamental redemption possible?
There is a very interesting system in your book, speaking of incarnations, that in the Juliet, currency is time. Every person has a specific amount of time before they expire. But then they go into being quiet. What, how would you describe that to someone who hasn't read that?
Basically, one of the other interesting, for me, interesting aspects of the Juliet society is exactly this system. So society is essentially divided into two classes: the nobles and the quiet. Nobles are essentially human beings, as all of us in sort of biological bodies, and they essentially they live in sort of post-scarcity environment where they can mostly spend their time pursuing art and sort of whatever activities they choose to involve themselves in. Whereas the quiets have sort of typically artificial machine-like bodies that take many different shapes, ranging from sort of little insect-like creatures to actual sort of titanic robots that actually carry the city of the Juliet on their backs across the deserts of Mars. Essentially, it's sort of, the Juliet is in some sense a design society. It's sort of, it's supposed to be self-sustaining and stable. It's supposed to have certain utopian ideals, and one of those things is that it is to introduce an element of artificial scarcity, and sort of in a future where essentially death, biological death, is kind of obsolete. Sort of to introduce an artificial element of finiteness that gives this sort of human existence meaning, and therefore in the society there is this cycle of you have a certain amount of time. You actually have a watch that sort of that shows how much time you have left as a human being, that sort of ticks down. You have time beggars who desperately try to get more time to even sometimes down to sort of minutes or seconds to extend their existence as a human being. Whereas others sort of actually embrace this and really want to spend this quiet period where we're actually a lot of their brain structures actually are altered to perform the tasks that quiet perform. And some people actually end up missing being quiet when they come back.
Now I would like to ask you a couple of questions about how you got this published, because that's a very interesting story, I think. You submitted one chapter, right?
Well, there was a bit more to it than that. So essentially, I think the sort of couple of main elements that sort of got me to this point where in fact, first of all, when I moved to Edinburgh about 10 years ago, I joined a very very good, very professional writers group, which was a very good environment to actually develop basic writing skills and sort of get sometimes very brutal and very honest feedback from some very professional writers, including Charlie Stross, who I believe was here.
Writer's block.
That's right. And eventually I got to the point where other group members were saying, okay, you should actually start sending the stories out to various markets to get something published. So I did that. Had a few short stories out first in sort of online formats like futurismic.com, and then short story collections, and some of them eventually made it to a couple of the best of the year collections like Gardner Dozois and David Hartwell. Those then sort of attracted the attention of a literary agent called John Jarrell, who is quite a prominent name in the science fiction circles in the UK. John sort of asked me actually to send me an email back in 2006, asking if I needed an agent to represent me, and I never got the email. So it was eaten somehow by an overly eager spam filter at the time. But as fate would have it, John sort of took the contact up again a couple of years later, sort of going through his contact list, and this time we actually managed to make contact. John then sort of strongly encouraged me to write a novel, because it's in the agent's interest to sort of push the writer to some extent to get to the part of the literary game where that actually makes money these days. I mean, maybe this is something that will change in the future, but at the moment I make money from writing novels. So at that point I had sort of an unfinished manuscript for a novel I'd been working on and off for about 3 years, so this gave me some motivation to try to finish it. However, it sort of ended up to the point where I felt I was kind of beating my head on the wall with it, and dug up an old idea from the desk drawer, which sort of I had a vague idea about a thief in this sort of bizarre game theory prison. Wrote one chapter, sent it to John, who, funnily enough, on the same day happened to have a meeting with Simon Spencer on Balance about another client of his, but nevertheless John asked if he could show this chapter to Simon. And of course that was okay with me. My expectation was, okay, Simon's going to say, well, I'm not really interested, or it's kind of nice, maybe let's see the final manuscript when it's ready. But instead he then contract basically this chapter. Although as Mark pointed out yesterday, this is actually the way Galantis tends to operate. They sort of the 3-book deal itself is not so notable in the sense that they actually their policy to try to buy authors rather than books. But nevertheless, it was quite a big shock to the system.
So when is the second book coming out?
So the second book is called The Fractal Prince, and that should come out in the UK in March 2012, so it's a bit long to wait. Yeah.
Will it feature characters from the book?
Yeah, so it's to some extent it is a continuation of the story of Jean and Bien, the other main character, but it'll also introduce a few other characters and a completely different kind of setting as well. So if you say that the first book, the main theme is memory, and sort of the past, as how we define ourselves with our memories and our past. The second book is very much about our present and our sort of immediate comprehension of reality, consciousness. Also stories, because if you think about what there's one way to think of consciousness actually is a story we create and a story we tell ourselves, or actually it's more like a series of stories within the story that keeps us alive and gives us continuity. It's sort of like very much like Arabian Nights, where Scheherazade sort of in order to avoid being executed by King Shahrazar, actually keeps telling him stories within stories to sort of ensure that her head doesn't get chopped off. So that's in my opinion sort of somewhat similar to what's actually going on inside our heads, and some of that as well as actually some sort of more direct Arabian Nights
for those of you who have read this book, you know that there's quite a bit of Finnish in it. Well, not a lot, but still. but the book is written in English. It has recently been translated to Finnish. How did that feel, reading the Finnish translation of your book that you wrote in English?
It was very, very strange. So, I mean, a lot of bilingual people and a lot of bilingual writers actually say that thinking in another language to some extent makes you like a slightly different person. It's again the same thing I was talking about. How do we process reality? Language is a very important element of that. So when I was when I was reading the translation or the early samples of the translation, it felt very much like I was reading my English personality's words, but in Finnish. So it created a lot of cognitive dissonance. But we had a very close collaboration with the translator Antti Autio, who actually slightly, we had some disagreements in the beginning, but in fact Antti demonstrated how difficult it is to translate anything and what a craft it really requires to be a translator, and how sort of you have to actually choose certain elements from the original to emphasize it, which are possible in the translation. And I think anyone wants to read it in Finnish, I would recommend it as well. It really does capture the sort of core aspects of the English version very well.
Well, thank you, Hannu, for a really great book and for you visiting our store.
Thank you very much.